all of you who are able to join the meeting today. I think what we'll do is we'll start with just a brief introduction of myself and the other people who will be speaking today, and then we'll get on into it. So for those of you who have not met me or maybe have met me and forgot all about me, my name is Harry Tenenbaum, and I'm with Evolved Houston. I'm the program manager for our commercialization and infrastructure program, as well as for our grants program. And I'm joined by Chris George, the executive director of Evolved Houston, as well as Karthik Sura, who is with the Rocky Mountain Institute, who will be speaking about public charging. We're also joined by Nick Negro, who is with Atlas Public Policy, and he'll be giving an overview on public policy updates, most specifically the Biden administration's infrastructure bill. We will then have our first Q&A session for questions related to public policy, Evolve Houston updates, and RMI and the city updates. We will then have Joe Walton from TCEQ give an update on Terp and TextVemp and other state level grant programs. And we will then have our final Q&A session. If there are any questions, I just ask that you please put them in the chat and we will get them addressed during the Q&A sessions. And with all that being said, I will hand it off to Chris George.
Thanks, Harry. And just I want to confirm, one, that we're recording, and then two, that folks are able to join and can hear us.
I can hear you loud and clear, and I see that we are recording.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if you can't hear us, if you're having technical difficulties, post in the chat and we'll try to address those. I'm not going to be on video, unfortunately. I'm running between meetings. But let me go ahead and quickly introduce Evolve Houston and why this meeting is taking place. And then I'll hand it over to Karthik. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Evolve Houston, we're the City of Houston public-private partnership addressing air quality and e-mobility. We have wonderful partners, the City of Houston, University of Houston, Shell, NRG, and Centerpoint. And our mission is to improve the region's air quality. We're doing it by addressing e-mobility, and a big part of that is understanding the landscape of grants at all levels and how those can be applied for and awarded in our region. Just a little bit about Evolve. So we have some really exciting projects underway. We have Project Rise, which is our regional infrastructure strategy for electrification. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's us, using data with our partners, Electrotempo, to understand where infrastructure needs to be based on key variables such as demand, census block data, et cetera. It's a really exciting project. We'd love to speak with you more about it if you'd like to, so feel free to reach out to us. We also have a equity program that's centered around Evolve's commitment to invest at least 40% of our funds in our programs. Harry mentioned commercialization and infrastructure and grants, but we also have a sizable marketing effort and program, a policy program that also support deeply our organization. And we are committing to investing in those programs, specifically 40% of funds in our maybe historically and traditionally underserved or disadvantaged communities. We also have a catalyst program around that where we're inviting community partners and private companies to support that effort initially for planning purposes and community outreach. So again, reach out to us if you would like to learn more about that. And then we have general marketing and awareness activities from ride and drives, partnering with the auto show, et cetera. So if any of those things sound exciting to you, we'd love to hear from you. I will also say we've been working closely with the City of Houston to evaluate not only their fleet electrification, which we supported through a fleet fleet assessment, but we are also discussing with them strategies for public charging, which Karthik is going to talk about on behalf of RMI. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Karthik. Thank you, Nick and Joe, for joining. I've seen some of these presentations and they're desperately needed here in our region, and I think they will be well received, and we'd love to welcome you to the region. Karthik, take it away.
Thanks so much, Chris. Mind if I share my screen now? Harry? Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, everybody. Hope you can all see my screen. So I'm Karthik Sora. So the City of Houston is partnering with RMI in terms of its sustainability community, and we are just trying to internally help the City of Houston with its climate action plan. And today I'm here to briefly talk about EV deserts and EV readiness in terms of building codes. So please feel free to post in the chat and I'll try and respond to any questions at any point. And please tell me if you can't hear anything. So in terms of agenda, just want to talk about public charging equity in EVSC deserts, and then sort of chat through what exactly is an EV ready building code. Oh, and to those who don't know, RMI is a think tank based in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm based in the City of Houston though, so happy to be here. So I guess first want to start off with a question. I'd like to make things more interactive. What pattern do you notice in terms of the current distribution of publicly available EV chargers right now? We give everybody like 30 seconds to look through. Not 30 seconds, probably like 5 seconds. Feel free to post in the chat. All close to highway, East End looking kind of pretty sparse. Somebody asked to return to full screen, so I'll try and do that. Hope that helps. Mainly Central Houston. And yes, that is the pattern that the City of Houston is aware of, and that we have noticed at RMI, is that the benefits of charging infrastructure are not necessarily distributed across the entire city. And in order to really achieve the full potential of electric vehicles, we're going to have to make sure that this pattern is disrupted in terms of making certain that everybody gets access in some way or form to electric vehicle charging.
Hey, Karthik, your audio keeps cutting in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I'll just talk a lot louder. Sorry about that, everybody. And thanks for saying that. So one possible solution, and I want to bear in mind that this is a working hypothesis, is that parks, libraries, and community centers, as you can see from this map, are roughly equitably placed across the City of Houston. And so using these, like other jurisdictions have done in terms of publicly available EVSC, probably level 2, could make a big difference in avoiding charging deserts across the City of Houston. So going to the next slide. And so the tentative goal, once again, this is a working hypothesis on behalf of RMI for the City of Houston, is that all Houston residents are within a certain distance of publicly available EVSC or an EV or an EV ride sharing program. And so by placing EVSC at all parks, libraries, and community centers, there's over 100 potential areas in total. We could target it trying to hit around 5% of parking spots with level 2 EVSC. And we would aim to fund this through a combination of local, state, and federal funding, as future participants will talk about the available state and federal funding opportunities. This could also accomplish the goal of dual usage for both city employees and community members, because a lot of these have intersections in terms of both members. And aiming also to learn from our counterparts in other highly rated EVSC jurisdictions that have really equitably placed public charging networks. And so that's the current working hypothesis that we are looking at. And we're hoping to roll out some initiatives on, hoping that the City of Houston can roll these out in the next couple of months. But once again, still working hypothesis. Sorry, I'm just going to check and see if there's any questions. C4. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to work on the audio now. So another thing that we want to sort of chat about is future proofing, and so how future proofing can save costs for customers. And so in case studies for EVs per parking spaces in San Francisco, for example, I think we all know that San Francisco has enormous construction costs, and so trying to figure out how to save those by pre-planning and future proofing can make a lot of sense. And so one of the big sets of issues is like a lack of pre-wiring, a lack of putting conduits in advance. And so a lot of data from RMI and from countless studies has shown that you can deliver savings on the order of 10% of the total project cost, as opposed if you do this in advance, as opposed to just trying to retrofit everything. That can deal a lot of benefits in terms of making like larger scale investments possible. I think I see question, how much focus outside of the city of Houston in the burbs? So I'm speaking on behalf of RMI for the city of Houston, but I do know that Chris had mentioned before the RISE initiative. So there's definitely more interest in trying to make regional coordination, including the burbs, possible to make everybody in the greater Houston area part of the have access to electric vehicle charging. And so future-proofing, just going back to the concept, future-proofing can be a really powerful way to save costs and make EVs more accessible to the general population in terms of lowering costs for jurisdictions. And something that other jurisdictions are considering are EV readiness requirements in the building codes. And so we're not talking about just like the San Franciscos and the Oaklands, we're talking about like Houston peer cities like Atlanta, Chicago, Orlando, Salt Lake City, St. Louis, and many more jurisdictions. And so just going through what this sort of means, you have EV capable in terms of an EV readiness type of standard where you have enough electrical capacity installed panels to support future charging spots. And there's dedicated branch circuits to make sure power is available for future charging stations. And so this lowers the constraint, like we were talking about future proofing, lowers the amount of like retrofitting that has to be done and is necessary. EV ready, it means that you have both the EV capable requirements, but you have the addition of wiring in a junction box, just like for a close dryer, for example. Finally, EV installed is you have everything that we talked about before, but you actually have the EV charging station. And so different jurisdictions are considering building codes across the United States with different EV readiness requirements. The city of Houston's current status is that it's most likely going to be adopting the 2015 IECC building code in the coming months, and it will begin consideration of the 2021 IECC building code is most likely going to begin consideration of the 2021 IECC building code in early 2022. And I don't want to take too much time, and so I think I'm a little bit over, but please continue sharing questions in the chat and we can try and answer whenever available. But I'm going to turn it back over to you, Harry, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Karthik. Really some interesting items there to discuss, certainly when speaking about EV ready building codes and cost differences to retrofit homes for electric vehicle charging versus houses that are pre-wired. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Nick, who will talk about policy. I'll hand it over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay now? Okay, cool. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. My name is Nick Nigro. I'm based in Washington, D.C. So not in Houston, but I've been to Houston a handful of times, and I do love it down there. So hopefully get a chance to visit soon. I was asked to come and talk with you all about what's going on up in the Hill in Congress around the potential for investments from the federal government. It is undoubtedly the single largest potential investment in electric transportation in U.S. history by a large margin. So before I get into the details of the bills, I just want to make sure y'all know where I'm coming from. Atlas Public Policy is based in Washington, D.C. We have some staff on the West Coast as well. We're a small business. We a small private company who does work with a number of public agencies at the city and state level. We also do work with nonprofits and foundations, and along with some private businesses. Our main area of focus is in climate change and energy policy, particularly around transportation electrification. We bring data, we bring analytical capacity to our customers, and we also provide strategic advising and analysis. Sort of signature product in the EV hub space, in the EV space, is called EV Hub. It's a website that folks who are in public agencies can register for free access to. There's also a lot of free resources for folks who don't have licenses. And it's essentially designed to be a one-stop shop for everything electric transportation. We have somewhere near 1,200 users, so it's single-handedly the largest community of people working on electric transportation policy around the country. And all the details I'm going to present to you today on these bills are available publicly just off the homepage. You can see a snapshot actually of a link there where we're summarizing the details of the bills being debated here in Congress. Before I get into the details of the bills, I just want to remind folks of where we're at from a market perspective. This is all data from EV Hub as well. It's really important to mention, because of the momentum here, how important it is that Congress really kind of finish the job and accelerate investments in EVs, because there is a real potential here for benefits to society, benefits to the climate, and benefits to our economy. Last 2 months in EV sales had about 5% of light duty market share. That's hands down a record. Month over month records for EVs every month so far in 2021. And we're going to expect to far exceed our total record sales for EVs this year. So while I am talking a lot today about public investments, it's really important to provide context on where the private sector is in this space. On EV Hub, basically every time a company is making a public announcement about some sort of investment in EVs, we log it in a database so that folks have access to all the details of what each company is trying to do in electric transportation. And we've tallied over $500 billion of announced investments. Of that 500 or so billion, about 140 is expected to be made in the United States. So that means the vast majority of the money is right now going to be invested overseas somewhere else, benefiting those economies. So it's really up to us as a policy community to try to make the environment here for doing business better in the US, both for building and manufacturing the vehicles and for selling them. Just a quick flag on the most recent investment announcement from Ford, $11 billion. That was in 2 states in the Southeast, Kentucky and Tennessee. Importantly, in the state of Kentucky, that is the single largest investment in the state's history. And in Tennessee, it's another demonstration of their winning strategy for attracting EV investments in the state. And to the folks in Texas here, I just can wish you all congratulations for landing Tesla's new headquarters, essentially. I'm sure folks heard that Tesla is moving their headquarters out of California and into Texas. And just ahead of this meeting, I saw an announcement from Hyundai saying that their $7.4 billion announcement planned investments in electric transportation are going to depend in part on the federal legislation. What Washington will do is directly affecting how this company is going to make their investments. If it could be made more plainly, I'm not sure it could, for how important it is that Congress do something here. The numbers I'm going to show you in a moment are going to dwarf these, but it is important to recognize that over the last few years, there's been significant acceleration in the investment from the public sector overall, in state awards and federal awards towards electric transportation. You can see there's a huge switch from the mid 2010s to the last few years. But really, it's about what's being debated in Congress that is the potential for us to really accelerate adoption. So there are 2 bills being debated right now. One is the Invest in America Act. It's also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, yada, yada, yada. You've probably heard 4 different versions of how this bill is being discussed and described in the press. And that is essentially the transportation reauthorization package, usually a bipartisan affair in Washington. And the second bill is the Build Back Better Act. That is the budget, essentially. It is also expected to be passed through reconciliation. So you often hear it being called as the reconciliation bill. That is focused on the priorities of the Biden administration, and hence it's called the Build Back Better Act. So for the bipartisan bill, it's under negotiation. I will say that all the tea leaves are sort of saying, reading the tea leaves sort of indicate that what is in legislation now is likely what would pass, in that it would be a huge investment in EVs. You can see $30 billion of eligible funding for electric vehicles and over $7 billion of funding dedicated towards EVs. That dwarfs all cumulative public investments in EVs across the United States to date. So in one move, they could more than double the amount of public investments made in the technology, not including the federal EV, the passenger electric vehicle tax credit. That is actually quite difficult to calculate how much that's been cost the federal government, but for all the other investments, it would dwarf it. So what are the details of that bill and where would the money go? So $5 billion of it would go to what's called the National Electric Vehicle Formula Program. For folks who are very familiar with state DOTs, that would be formula funding going directly to the departments of transportation around the country to make investments in electric vehicle charging. Now, I will say most state transportation departments do not have a lot of experience issuing these kind of funding opportunities. And so I would expect many of them to coordinate with either their air agency, their energy office, or some other part of the state government that might have more experience with funding these kind of programs. Particularly states that have stood up programs as part of the Volkswagen settlement. They started to build institutional capacity in order to distribute those funds. They might look to those entities to help them with funding this program, assuming it was to be enacted. The other big ticket item for all electric transportation is for school buses. $2.5 billion that would go to EPA. That would be the first major federal investment in school buses. Certainly in the US, we typically aren't funding a ton of the school buses across the country out of Washington. So this would be a big boost to that technology. Another $2.5 billion would go to zero emission or low emission buses, meaning alternative fuels could compete for those dollars as well. I will just asterisk this and suggest that EVs are well positioned to win a lot of that money. And the Volkswagen settlement is good evidence of that. So far, over half of the funds from the Volkswagen settlement have gone to EVs, even though in most programs, all alternative fuels are eligible for funding. Another program is focused on infrastructure as well, as $2.5 billion. And like the second school bus program I mentioned, that would be eligible for not just EVs, but also other alternative fuels. My same point about EVs competing well goes for that as well. So it's not just about deploying infrastructure for charging and deploying vehicles. The bipartisan bill also includes a lot of investments in the grid, and a good share of that money would go towards enhancing and encouraging the more efficient vehicle to grid technologies that are currently in development. In total, we break this down by agency as well, and you can see that of the $7.7 billion that we've tallied that's dedicated for zero emission vehicles, the lion's share is going to DOT and EPA. There's a small share going to Department of Energy. And then you can see the distribution of the funds for the other programs that I just mentioned. So in total, it's over $30 billion. That would be a considerable investment if a lot of that ended up going to EVs. But we'll see. As most of us know right now, the debate in Congress it's unknown exactly what's going to be happening. So the second major bill is the Build Back Better Act. Is the priorities of the Biden administration, and it includes considerably more money for electric transportation, specifically over $34 billion for EV dedicated funding and over $100 billion for eligible funding for EVs. You can see the asterisk here. We don't know exactly how much the tax incentives would be expected to cost, and frankly, that would be very expensive, and so that's not included in these numbers. But you'll see a moment what incentives I'm speaking about. So for the money that we can talk about easily, it's $10 billion for EPA. for electric transportation projects. So this is infrastructure, battery recycling, and also electrification of ports. The other major part of fleet electrification is for the federal fleet. We actually just completed some research on our website, atlaspolicy.com, if you're interested, on the total cost of ownership for doing federal fleet electrification, and we found some very promising options for the federal government over the next decade in order to electrify the fleet, and that includes U.S. Postal Service. And in the Build Back Better Act, you've got dedicated funding to do both. And frankly, with this amount of money, it's quite possible that the entire federal fleet could be electrified, in my opinion. Another major focus of the Build Back Better Act is equity and trucks. And so with $5 billion, again, going to EPA for the direct purchase of clean heavy duty vehicles, workforce development, and other facets of medium and heavy duty electrification, even more money for EPA to go towards port electrification. And finally, $2 billion going to the Department of Energy for deploying charging infrastructure at specific places, work sites, multi-unit housing, and publicly accessible locations. And this is probably the biggest, frankly, most controversial part of the EV components of the bill, and that is around the reforming of the tax credit. So for those who are not familiar with those details, if you have an all-electric vehicle right now, you qualify for a $7,500 tax credit if you don't buy a Tesla or a GM, a vehicle manufactured by General Motors. Both of those manufacturers have already exceeded their cap, 200,000, so they're no longer eligible for the federal tax credit. Ford is probably going to exceed that cap next year. So without reform, all of the leading EV manufacturers no longer get that benefit. The reform would remove the cap, number one, but number two, would add an adder for specific facets of the vehicle itself. If it's made with domestic batteries, that's an extra $500. And if it's made with union labor, which currently only really means General Motors, Stellantis, which is Fiat formerly Chrysler, and Ford, you would get another $4,500. So in total, it could be $12,500 for an EV. So clearly that would be an incredible incentive for domestically produced union-built vehicles. But even if you weren't union-built, it would still be considerably valuable tax incentive that would be opened back up to the Teslas of the world because that 200,000 vehicle cap would be lifted. There's a heavy debate in Congress and in the press right now about how this tax credit is being structured. And so it's not clear to me yet if it will stay as it's defined here on the slide. So in total, you can see we've tallied all of the numbers based on the legislation to get us to the $34 billion of zero emission vehicles targeted money and then zero emission vehicle eligible money. And across all the different agencies, you can see the difference in priorities really, which would sort of make sense that in the case of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the transportation department, the DOT has the lion's share of the funds, and in the Build Back Better Act, you have more money going to the Department of Energy and EPA. Timeline, we'll have to see. It's hard to say. There's lots of different prognosticators out there trying to predict when things will happen. They could have already happened, but things have been delayed. And so my hunch is we'll know what the future holds for EVs in the US sometime this year, sometime this quarter. And the inextricable link between this Build Back Better Act and the Invest in America Act, it's hard to see those two breaking right now. It's either some sort of version of both of them would pass. And so the compromises are underway, and we'll have to wait and see. And I'm happy to answer questions that y'all have. I'm not a political person, so I can't really talk too much about the likelihood of various negotiations between Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin and the House Democrats, but I'm happy to offer any input I can. So
thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Harry. I see some questions. Would you like me to go through those now?
Sure. And I have a few questions that came to me, so it may be easier for me to just read them out to you.
Sounds good.
The first question is, what happens when these billions of dollars run out? It'll take a good 2 decades to build out the U.S. infrastructure to make it EV ready.
So that's a great question, and I think that in terms of the impacts on the market, right now, the 2010s were about establishing whether or not EVs were a real thing, and the 2020s, in my opinion, are about the fight over the future of the auto industry and frankly, vehicle manufacturing more generally, because as battery costs have declined, the practicality of electrifying medium and heavy duty trucks has grown considerably. And so by the end of this decade, we'll know where the leading manufacturing hubs of these vehicles will be. And without these investments, it's not clear that it will be the United States, frankly, right now. Where up until this past year, we were kind of losing to China and Europe. And so what will happen after these investments run out is if they're made, I think we'll likely be put in a better position to regain that leadership in the global manufacturing of vehicles. Without those investments, it's harder to see that happening. What's the next question?
Thank you, Nick. Would funding for V2G technologies include integration with and development of microgrids?
It's hard to say. I mean, there's going to be a lot of flexibility. The language in the bills, as specific as it is at sometimes, it's very vague. And there's going to be a lot of flexibility within the Department of Energy. I know that they're very interested in these kind of demonstration projects, like what's been happening at Pecan Street for some time in Texas. I see them wanting to continue to advance those kind of demonstration projects. But I do want to emphasize that I think a big part of the expectation for these investments is deployment of technology, not just testing things out, but really helping achieve scale. And so there's a lot of investments in manufacturing. There's a lot of investments in supply chain building and such. And so to the extent to which microgrids need that kind of assistance, I think they could expect to get it with, particularly with the infrastructure bill components that I mentioned earlier in the presentation.
Great, thank you. What's in the infrastructure bill that's related to EVs, not just the dollar values, but policy initiatives as well?
So in terms of policy making, one of the probably most innovative aspects of the infrastructure package is the establishment of a joint office between the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy. I think it's funded with some few $100 million. To date, there's been, I would call it, less formal collaboration and cooperation between the two agencies on how they work on the future of transportation. This office would really codify that and really establish the joint partnership between the two agencies, and that I think will have a rolling effect on funding programs, funding opportunities, staffing at the agencies, and the extent to which the energy offices and state DOTs work together in the states. So I think that's going to have a lasting effect on the policymaking aspect of transportation.
Great. And then the last question that I have here, unless anyone else has questions to post in the chat, is everything at the federal level, or will authority or funding or other resources be given to state and local municipalities?
A great example of the state level funding is the formula funding I mentioned earlier on, the $5 billion for in the infrastructure package. That's going to go straight to DOTs in the formula funding way that they normally get for surface transportation projects. So they're going to have lots of control over how that money gets spent. There are some competitive grant programs baked into the legislation. But the states are going to have a strong influence, and localities to some extent will have a strong influence over where that money ends up. A good example of how this could play out is the low or no emission program at the Federal Transit Administration. That's been in place for a very long time. For the last several years, all the money's gone to electric buses, and that money is going to nearly every state. And I think that if there are competitive grants, the federal government is going to likely try to continue to make sure that lots of states get to benefit, particularly the ones who wouldn't be doing these kind of funding opportunities without the assistance of Washington.
Great. And then actually one more question. How much of the money can Texas expect to receive?
Somebody actually tried to answer this in the chat here, 408 million over 5 years. I'm not sure what, which program that person's referring to, but I don't know the answer to that. It will be very hard to tally that, because a lot of the money is actually formula fund, not formula funded. It would be funded through competitive grants and such, and so it's too soon to tell.
And then a follow-up question is there any guidance on how much utilities would receive and types of programs that may be available for electric utilities?
Well, a lot of the grid programs, likely the utilities will get involved. I don't know exactly the tally as it relates to electric vehicles. I would encourage folks to check out the EV Hub website, where we try to break down each program and look for the programs that are relevant for just grid related activities.
Great, thank you. And then actually one question, I'm not sure, Karthik, if you want to answer this, or if someone from the city wants to answer this. It was a question that came through about EV building codes. Is the city of Houston considering adoption of EV readiness as part of the 2015 or 2021 codes? And then a comment that EV readiness isn't baked into the national code yet.
And I'm going to defer to my friend over at RMI on that one.
Yes, so I think Tomas, the city of Houston, is going to answer this question.
Hi, this is Tomas from the Sustainability Office of the city. So the answer to this is it is not part of the 2015 amendment that is currently in progress. It will likely be considered as part of the updates to 2021 IECC when we get started on that.
Great, thank you for that, for answering that. If there are no more questions for Evolve, for the city, and for Atlas, I think at this time we can go ahead and hand over the presentation to Joe Walton from TCEQ.
Hello, I'm Joe Walton from Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. There we go. Trying to share my screen here. Why am I clicking this wrong?
I can see your screen. It looks like you have your PowerPoint open.
Yeah, but it's not letting me go to slideshow. Anyway, so yeah, Joe Walton, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I'm up here in Austin, but I was raised in Houston, so go Astros, first off. I'll talk about some funding opportunities that we have through the Terp program and the TextVent program that might be of interest to everybody. First thing is I'll be talking about legislative changes that happened during the past legislative sessions to the Terp program, and some of our funding overview. And then into the TXVIMP, the Texas Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Plan. So the legislative overview, the legislature, there's basically 3 bills that passed that really directly impacted the TERP program: HB 863, HB 2361, and HB 4472. And I'll go over to each one of these in a little more detail. 963 impacted our natural gas vehicle grants program. I know this is about electricity here, but this is an alternative fuel program. And what it did is it's really allowed us to put used vehicles as eligible projects in the program. You used to have to purchase a brand new electric or natural gas vehicle, but now you can buy one that's up to 6 years old, depending on when we open up the grant rounds. 2361 impacted our new technology implementation grants program. This is really the stationary program of part of TERP, and a lot of this that where the legislative changes was around flaring and other oil and gas recovery to kind of quell some of the emissions, that fugitive emissions from those sites. And then 4472 is the big one. And this is one that everybody always wants to know about. And what it did, for part of it is it did incorporate stuff from the other 2 bills, but it created what is called the TERP Trust Fund. And so in the beginning days of TERP used to operate with, there's these 5 different fees that got paid into the TERP program. You know, when you purchase a heavy duty vehicle or get a heavy duty vehicle inspection, there's these little fees that are there, and they all go into the TERP program, and it used to come over. But during the process, at one point in time, the money started coming to us as an appropriation process. Anybody who worked with the state budgets knows that appropriation process is you get your budget at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the biennium, work on a 2-year cycle for those I don't know, and you get the money spread out, or you get your money and then you set up your program for over those 2 years' time. What it did in this bill was to kind of go back to the original process, and it set up a fund outside of the appropriation process where money gets paid into this TERP fund every month, and that money then comes to TERP to use. 35% of it goes to TxDOT, though, to do congestion mitigation projects, but the rest of the 65% comes to TERP for us to manage projects. Another little thing that it also addressed was some marine vessel operating areas. So what the funding looks like is this. It's broken down into, trying to make this a little bigger for people. It's broken down into some that are set cost and some that are percentages of the fund that's paid in. I really can't tell you how much those percentages are because I really don't have an estimate on how much funding is going to come to us over the biennium. We'll probably have better estimates as a couple months go on. We might be able to put them at that point in time. You know, to be perfectly honest, the past year has kind of made people making future prediction of funds kind of difficult. But you know, we do have some set funds, you know, alternative fueling facilities program, which does allow for the implementation of electric charging stations, both for light duty and for heavy duty. It's set at $12 million for the biennium. We also have our light duty program, which gives people up to $2,500 for the purchase of an electric car that was bought in Texas. That's the key part of the legislation, bought in Texas. And you know, you just buy it, you get $2,500. There is a limit on 2,000 cars. So once 2,000 cars are met, the money is stopped at that point in time. There are a lot of other programs here that allow for electric vehicles. We have our Clean School Bus program. You're allowed to purchase electric buses there. It's a first come first serve program where, you know, they come in, I'm getting rid of this bus and I'm replacing it with this type of bus or an electric bus even, and you get X amount of dollars. It's all set up to you on the front end, so you know what you're going to get. It's a pretty simple program. And there are several others here going down even to our big ones, the diesel emission reduction incentive programs, which includes our ERIG program that people have heard about and our rebate program, both of which electric heavy duty vehicles are eligible. If you want any more questions on this, we have a website, www.terpgrants.org. Go to org.com, or you can email us or call us at a 1-800 number. And again, that's for the Terp program. And there is a lot larger funding this biennium than last biennium. So the opportunities of projects do increase with the opportunities of funding. And we'll see what this biennium has to open up for us. We are currently in the planning process. You will see some programs open shortly. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, you might even hear an announcement of one of them. But they'll start rolling out over the biennium, one a month, one every couple of months, something like that. You'll see them come out. Now for the Texas Environmental Mitigation Trust Program. We just recently opened, kind of open. I'll go into why I said kind in a minute. The DC fast charger and hydrogen dispensing equipment program. This is for light duty chargers only, and that is a requirement that is that comes down from the trust to us. So it isn't for heavy duty charging, sadly, but it is for light duty charging, which most people we just heard talk about. You may be eligible up to $1,500 per unit installed. I know there's some questions out there exactly how we're defining unit. We will be posting that answer soon to our website. So just be as an alert for that. And it will come in a few weeks. There's some dates I'll show you in a minute. We do have a maximum though per project. Now a project is a site. One, as we would call a gas station in the old days. That's a project, and you'll get up to $600,000, whether it's electric or hydrogen per site. The electric also has the thing of $150 per unit to divide up amongst that $600,000. There are also some things that are passed down to us through the mitigation plan and other things that if your charger is available to the public, we only can pay up to 70% of the cost. So if your unit is less than $150,000, we still can't pay you $150,000. We only can pay you 70% of what that cost. If it's in a multi-unit dwelling, then it's 60% of what that cost. The hydrogen has 33% and 25% based on the kilograms per day that the unit can dispense. There are some limitations that we're putting on the site. The site must charge using one CHAdeMO charger and one CCS charger. If you do have an alternative charger that's not a CHAdeMO or CCS, you must have at least one CHAdeMO or CCS per alternative charger on your site. It's kind of a 1-to-1 kind of ratio there. So if you're putting up one of these alternative ones that are out there, then you must have another CHAdeMO or CCS to marry with it on the site, not together, on the site. And there are some limitations on the hydrogen fuel cell capability of pressure and how much you can dispense per day. There are going to be two phases of this. Phase one, the projects have to be on the light duty side, have to be rated. The unit must be rated at 150 kilowatts. Again, there are some questions we know on the definitions, what we mean by that. That will be posted up to our website into a written statement. So look for that in a couple days, a few days. Also, the statement must, or the charging station must be within a half mile of an interstate, US, state highway, or emergency evacuation route. That is as the crows flies. We're not going to get into measuring from exits or from turnabouts and things like that. It's going to be simple. Here's the highway. Are you within a half mile of it? We do that by GPS coordinates. So on your application, you're going to be asked to put GPS coordinates in. So please do that. And it's easy enough with modern phone technology to get GPS coordinates. Phase 2, which will come about a month and a day, 31 days after the first one, is it just opens it up to the charging station anywhere in the state. You don't have to meet, and it gets rid of the minimum kilowatt requirement. So just as charging station anywhere in the state, come on in, you're eligible. Now, I said there are some dates, and these are the important parts of this. October 6th, which is, last week, we issued an RFGA, and that's a request for grant applications. It is available on the TechSvent website, and I'll give you the website in a minute. You can go there, you can look for the RFGA, and you can download it and read it. And it'll have all the requirements for the program written out for you, with the exceptions of some of these more specific questions that people are asking. Yesterday, we actually did the webinar on how to fill out the application. But if you do have questions, please call us. We have people that are there to help you. All of our questions, though, we do want people to submit to us in writing. So send us an email to the email address I'm going to give to you in a minute. And we're going to answer those questions, and we're going to post them onto our website. We have to answer every question that comes into us, and we're going to have to post them. So don't worry about us not answering your question. We have to answer your question if people are worried. So there might be several of the same questions. We might group them all together in one answer, but we will be answering your questions, and we will post them to our website. And then, again, phase 1 opens up on November 2nd, and then phase 2, December 3rd. And then, highly unlikely, but if nobody spends up the funds by January 3rd, 2022, the program will close. Here's the important things I said I'd give you. The website is txvwfunds.org, or you can just Google in Texas VW funds. It'll get to it, or VW mitigation. It comes to our website. The email address is vwsettle@tceq.texas.gov. Again, all your major questions, please just email them in to that email address, and we will answer them. Even if I just talked about some of the ones that I know we're going to answer, if you still have those same questions, please email them in, so we have a record that you have that question and we're answering it. Or if you have questions, please feel free to call us at 833-215-8989. And with that, I will stop sharing, I think. And I will answer some of the basic questions that I can answer right now.
Hey, Joe, I received quite a few questions for you, so I'll go ahead and read them off. But I think just as a disclaimer, I will also make sure to submit these questions via email to the vwsettle@tceq.texas.gov email address, just so that way there's that written record of email of these questions for you. And it actually looks like there's, I think maybe we'll address this one first. There's a question in the chat saying that the txvwfunds.org website does not work. did we crash the site with with traffic, or is there an issue with the site?
I'm not sure. I'm going to it right now. I got it to work.
Okay.
So it gives you it gives you to a link within the commission. Automatically goes there. Just Google it. The first thing that comes up at Google is our website, and you don't even have to get close to Googling. You just have to get close. I mean, around those words, they all just go straight to us. I've tried many different combinations, knowing people that would be Googling, looking for our website.
Awesome. So the first question is, in terms of applying to the grant, at what step of the installation process do applicants need to be? Do they need to have the chargers installed, or can they still be in the process of planning or construction?
You can be totally in the process of planning and construction. And this is spelled out in the RFGA, so I'm not giving anything away here, but, and I should have stated one part earlier. We will only, our programs are reimbursement based. So you have to incur the cost and then we will reimburse you for this cost. But the only costs that are reimbursable are costs that are incurred after the application date. So you can be in construction, you can be in doing anything right now, but any of those costs you're doing right now are not reimbursable from us, by us, until that application day of January 2nd or December 3rd, whichever is applicable to you. So yeah, you could be at any stage you want. You will have 2 years, 24 months to complete the project. So you don't even have to, you just have to have a site kind of determined right now, kind of get a site agreement in place with the property owner if you're not the property owner. And you can work out all that other stuff within that first year of the contract. In the second year, do all your construction. That is fine by us.
Great. The next question is based on the, are the percentage breakdowns of funding based off of formula or the entire budget?
It is based off of formulas in the well, it's based off the legislation. And that's why I don't have a good estimate for you right now of what the different categories will be, because we have to have a good budget revenue estimate to start making some of those predictions. And there's been, give us a couple months and we'll start figuring out what it is. But for, right now, yes, the money that comes into us gets broken out into those areas. We don't have to spend them by that month in those areas or not. It's up to, there's leeway to the program to put the money where it's best for the state at that time. But yeah, I don't really have a good answer for you right now until we know more about what money will be available to us over this next biennium.
Okay.
But that BRE is people who know how to go look that stuff up. It's out there. But we're just not solid on it yet in the program.
Gotcha. Are there any previous grants, specifically grants, the level 2 grant that will be coming back?
I don't know. That one was subscribed pretty much all the way. I believe all the funding will go out. There was a bunch of applications at the very end of the grant round eligibility period. And I know they're reviewing those applications. It looks like they will fund down to 0. We'll see when they're done. If it does, but it looks like that way. There is no plan right now to open up another level 2 in the VW program, but the Terp AFFB program that I talked about earlier, level 2 chargers are eligible in that program.
So I guess I'm looking forward, are there any grants under consideration for consumers other than DC fast charging?
For what? We have for vehicles, yes, but I'm not, we have a plethora of grant programs. I'm not exactly sure where they're looking at charging for heavy duty.
Okay, that's all
Oh, the EV battery recycling? No, there isn't grants available to us at this point in time. I've heard that question come up before, but current legislation and the Volkswagen Trust does not allow for that.
Are there any benefits for EVSC manufacturers or installers?
This helps you get your projects off the ground, and that's what these are. These are incentives to help, sprinkle out the charging infrastructures in the state of Texas. So, just depend on where you actually fit into that process, and do these grants benefit you or not is, a question on your business model. But that's what the purpose of these grants are, is to sprinkle out the adoption of that technology to get out there to benefit the users of the state, the adapters of the state.
Okay. How similar is the grant application for DCFC to the level 2 grant application that just wrapped up?
It's a little more information we need. It's similar, but there's a little bit more information we need, because we need to know certain things about your budget, and the application will point it out, because this is a lot more money. It's just not, hey, here's your money and build. It's only money can go to certain cost. So there's more cost around the budget. There's more information you put in the application about the budget. There is more information, again, in the application about what technology and chargers you're using, because you have to meet these requirements for phase 1 and phase 2. So it's a little more involved than the level 2. So the application is up there now on the website. You can go and download it and look at it now. You cannot submit it until those dates. But you can look at it and to make sure you have all the right information. And again, feel free to call that 1-800 number if you have questions about it.
Great, just a few more here. Are there grants available for the operation and maintenance of EV chargers?
No. These work on a reimbursement, and the funds are only available for a period of time. And operation and maintenance happens for a longer period of time than the grants are made for. So the cost is pretty much all upfront cost of building and installing the infrastructure.
Okay. And then the last question I have here, unless anyone drops any more in the chat, is can you share the results of the last level 2 charging grant?
Yeah. It is up on our website of where we have awarded and who and where they are. It is not up to date. I know that because of that last, again, rush of applications received at the end. Once all that settles down, they're going to re-update it. I don't know when that is. Give us time to finish that app. I think it's a couple months old right now, what's up there. But we'll update it when we finish awarding contracts. And it's there on the tab. It'll say reports. When you go to our website, you'll see where it is, and you'll find it. And there's reports on all our grants.
Okay. Well, that was the last question that I had. And it doesn't look like there are any more coming through in the chat. So thank you so much, Joe. That was a very informative session. Great to get some information from the state level. And with that, I know we are ahead of time, but I'd like to thank everyone who was able to attend the meeting today. I think this was definitely a very informative session from our speakers and some great questions as well from the crowd here. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to reach out to Evolve Houston or to the speakers themselves. And thanks again.